Welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Your host, Jill Hart, the coach's Alchemist. Couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. On this podcast, we celebrate the champions of change, the up-and-coming life, health and transformational coaches who are fearlessly stepping forward to make a difference in the world. Get ready for inspiring stories, practical tips, and powerful moments that will motivate you to make a positive change in your life and those around you. We're happy to have you join us on this incredible journey as we dive into the world of life, health, and transformational coaches who are lighting up the path towards a better tomorrow.
Hi, and welcome to the New World Order Showcase podcast. Today we have with us a special guest. Her name is Beth Allison. Beth is a caregiving coach, and Beth provides a safe harbor for those navigating life's turbulent water. She supports those experiencing life transitions so that their journey is easier and with intention. We're really happy to have you here, Beth, and I'm excited to share what you're doing with the audience because as we were talking about before the show started, I really have recently had personal experience with, oh my gosh, now what do I do? And that, totally deer in the headlights moment that I think a lot of people experience when, they have older loved ones or even, kids. Kids are having problems. Parents are getting it from both sides. So
absolutely.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It is really great to be here. As you said, for you, it was one of those sudden things that was not on your radar at the time. It could be that somebody ends up caring for a loved one because of a car accident or a sporting injury, or you just never know. And then they're in the role of caregiver, and it's, to your point, deer in headlights, don't know what to do. And you just go into motion and truly you're doing the best that you can with what you know in that situation. But there are things to think about, especially if you have a clue that it's coming.
Yeah, and that's this really kind of two situations. One when you see it coming and one when you don't. And if you're caught in the place where you don't see it coming and all of a sudden you're thrust into a caregiver position, there's so many things that you have no idea about. And if you're older, like I'm going to have to relate this to the experience that I just went through with my father-in-law. I'm 64 and I'm not able to do the manhandling that's required to take care of another adult human being. And it just takes some physical strength to be able to do some of these things, but there are tips and tricks. And I had fortunately hospice come by and they're like, do it this way. These are the tools we use to make these things easier. And, just basic care can be overwhelming.
And one is, to your point, is that physical part of the caregiving, right? Of moving the individual. The other part is there's an emotional part of it, which I think people hide away. They tuck it away, which is very important. And, for my situation that has led me to doing this coaching is my mom had Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
My dad was the primary caregiver. And, there were things that came up. I didn't know what her wishes were. She and my dad had those conversations, so I trusted that he knew. and I did trust him. I didn't think he's not the type of person to change it so that it works for him best.
Mhm.
Because if that was the case, I don't think he would have kept her at home as long as he did.
Mhm.
But um, he and I both took my mom to one of her appointments, and the doctor is, looking at her skin and is saying she really needs to bathe more, right? Her skin is very fragile. And we acknowledged that my mother had become fearful of water.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had shame and I had guilt when I looked at my dad and said, I can't make her. And I said, you have enough trouble getting her dressed and explaining to her why that she needs to get dressed. I said, there are people who can come in and do that. That's what they do. So I was afraid of when she got stubborn, she would get very rigid. And I
Mhm.
would be afraid to drop her, right? Or hurt her in some way. The other was that wasn't the relationship I wanted to have with my mom,
Mhm.
right? So I've learned, and I looked at my father after I told him about that with my mom. I said, by the way, I'm not going to be able to do it for you either. So let's just get that out of the way. And he understood. But, there's the things like, well, how many diapers did she change? How many, snotty noses did she wipe? Right. And I can't help her bathe, which is something that she needs. But one of the things that I talk to people about is that not, it's not that it's not the best care that you're able to give, but it may not be the best care that your loved one needs.
Yeah. And
Right.
and being able to accept help from other areas and knowing
That's
what's available to you.
That's huge, right? And like I talk with people all over the country, and I've talked to some outside of the US. And so I don't know the specific resources that are always available, but I can guide them to places where they could find out, where to
Mhm.
start to check. Everybody thinks that they don't have time. Not saying do it all at once, right? Take 15 to 30 minutes one day and go and just Google whatever it is. I can tell you Alzheimer's Association is great, but because it was sort of, we saw it progressing, but we were in denial for so long that when the time came, it was flat on. And when I looked at the site, I was like, I don't even think I spent 2 minutes because there was so much information, right? So first just go and find out where there are some resources, then go back when you have the right frame of mind and those types of things. And some people are good with online. There are some people who would prefer in person. So I started attending some of their events and going that way as opposed to the online. Um, so there's a lot you can do, but I think that we all live in denial until we are put in the position that we no longer can be in denial.
And it's such a shame because there's oh, you're when you're at the gate, it's like you have to spring into action, and there's all these little things that you mentioned, changing diapers and wiping noses, and that you felt the guilt of that. But she was A, young when she was doing that,
Mhm.
and B, you were little. It's a big difference between doing that for somebody who's large. They're the same size or larger than you. And even though they may be frail, their body mass is
Yes,
big, and it takes strength. And it's I've changed a million diapers easily in my lifetime for little kids, but when I had to change a diaper on my father-in-law, it was a totally different experience. He was humiliated. I
right.
honestly think that it was the moment he decided no, I'm done with this. I'm going on. You could just see it in his eyes. He was just horrified.
Well, I did not believe my mother would want that either, right? There was this part like, she didn't want that type of relationship either. She didn't want me to have to do that, right?
Mhm.
Um, and you know, my dad got it, so we did bring people in. I said, and also, Dad, the other thing is, so she can get really roaring mad, but they're gonna leave at the end of their shift,
Mhm.
and they've learned how to leave it at work, right? I said, and you're not gonna have to take the brunt of it, right? She may be
Yeah.
angry that you allowed somebody to come into the house. You know, there are gonna be these other things, but not that. And so those are the things of trying to find the things where other people can help. And you touched on it as well and said, accept it, right? People feel these are my parents, I've got to do it, it's my responsibility. Just suck it up and do it, right? And maybe you are the only one, and maybe in your situation, you do have to do it for whatever. Everybody's situation is different. And that's how I work with my clients, to try to be able to let them know and show them that there are options. But let's not spend a lot of time on options that aren't in alignment with what you can do, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in-home care can become very costly, as can facility care, right? And so when you're looking at that, having to like understand the financials, right, of your loved one, and especially if they're older, if they're not your dependent, right? So
Mhm.
I'm talking about, you know, do they have long-term care insurance? Right? Do they only, have they saved anything for this type of situation? That then takes the universe of options and narrows it, you know, as to what it could be. So I liken it to when you're looking to buy a house and you have $250,000, that's your budget. You do not want the agent showing you a $300,000 house. You can't afford it. And now everything's going to be measured against that.
Yeah. And you're going to be disappointed.
Right. So you never want to go into the um private pay facility that doesn't take Medicare, and you've already gone through, and then you start talking about the financials and they're like, well, we're, you know, private pay and we don't take Medicare. Well, you've just wasted time, which you don't have because you've got so much on your plate, right?
Mhm.
And the other is everything now that's going to measure up is going to seem not good enough, right? So
And
there's all that.
there are free resources. Are there resources that like hospice was Social Security or Medicare, one of those two
One
paid
of
for
them.
it, and it was insanely helpful. I mean,
Well, and there's also understanding what hospice is,
yeah,
right? So many feel like it's the place that they go, they just medicate them until they pass. That's not, I'm not going to say that there aren't some hospices that do that, right? But that's not the true intent of a hospice, right? It's palliative care. It's to keep your loved one as comfortable as possible. You know, the other interventions aren't going to improve. It comes down to a quality of life, right?
yeah,
And some people move on, that like not move on, but
yeah,
they
they
get
get
better,
better.
and they no longer need the hospice. That
Mhm.
has happened, but so many people don't even know that they think like hospice has to be the last thing.
And hospice isn't, and this was a shocker to me, isn't necessarily in a facility. It's
No,
often in your home, and they come to your home and they have different people that do different things. And God, they're so helpful.
and
And
they're yes, they're so helpful for what needs to be done, but they also have all these services that help the family,
Yes.
right? During and even after you have
Yes.
those resources. And my mom ended up falling and breaking her hip and having to go into rehab. And while she was in rehab, she broke her other hip. So she had 2 surgeries in the last 7 weeks of her life. But it also happened at the pandemic, so we couldn't go in. So one of the driving factors for us is because we couldn't see how she was. Hospice served as eyes and ears for us at that time. But they also see things that the family
don't see.
member or whatever wouldn't see, right? They're watching the breathing. They're in tune with some of these things. They can read a chart and know the medications and what they're doing, the people that come in. So, and a friend of mine, her husband unfortunately passed last year, and he wanted to be at home. They knew that he was really, but they discharged him from the hospital. He went home. Hospice came in, and she was like, it was a godsend, right? It just it gave a sense of calm too for her. Like there are skilled people who know what to be looking out for, that don't have that emotional part, like you're going to overreact and like really like you just, had some gas, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, whatever.
I
So it's
called the
just
gal
knowing
at
those
3
things.
o'clock in the morning. I think this is a death rattle. Can you listen? I mean,
Yeah,
I didn't know. I don't know what it sounds like. I don't know what I should be doing. Is there something else going on here that maybe I could do differently? And we're
right.
like, yeah, that's probably it. And they listened to us for an hour, talk about how we were sure he was going to get better. We
Yep. And they're like,
that
yeah,
night.
well, he might. And, and you need that kind of,
Hope.
yeah, you do. And you need that support of somebody who's not gonna, you know, shatter your hope. There comes a time when you're like, okay, it is happening. Um, and, but, there is so much that I know now, especially from the dementia perspective, that I wish I had known when I was going into it. And even some of the things that I've learned along the way through my networking and things like that. I know a lot of care providers, all the different ones. Um, and I continually learn, right? So I can share that. And that's why I do what I do, because it's not going to be easy. Whether it's dementia, it's cancer, it's a stroke, whatever it is, right? That journey is not going to be easy, but it can be made easier. And, about a year and a half later, my brother after my mom passed, and my father and I moved from Connecticut to Virginia. Um, my brother and I had a conversation with my dad and said, okay, let's just talk about, you're in independent living now, right? And, you're doing that, but what should we be looking for when you think it's time for you to have some more help? And what does that help look like? Right? And, oh, let's review he happens to have a long-term care policy.
Mhm.
Let's look at that so we know what the options are, and then we can go and look at some places. But it's a difficult conversation, and I selfishly wanted to have it because when that time comes for him to go into assisted living, he first wants some in-home and then assisted living when it's more medical
Mhm.
need. I won't feel as guilty when that time comes. As I said, won't feel as guilty. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna hope he remembers being part of the conversation so he's not as angry. Because he's not gonna want to go. I know he's not. Nobody likes to lose their independence,
Nope.
right?
And
But at the end of the day, for their safety, their security, for their well-being, and by the way, for the caregiver's sanity, you know that there's somewhere there that, maybe you're not jumping every time the phone rings, maybe only every other time that the phone rings. Right, because he's somewhere where people are taking care of him and that type of thing.
yeah, as long as my father-in-law was alive, he had congestive heart failure for a lot of years, and he lived on his own. He lived about an hour from us, um, in a house. It was a little house that he really couldn't take care of. So my husband would go up, his son, once a week and have lunch with him and do what needed to be done around the house. But he was a very private person. And though he lived with us for a lot of years, he lived with us almost 20 years when my kids were young. And the last 4 or 5 years of his life, he had this place that he wanted to live in by himself. So he was he just was increasingly not able to do stuff for himself.
Yeah.
And then he got COVID, and that was the end.
Mm.
But I honestly thought he was going to bounce back. He was just that kind of person. But he didn't want to talk about all of those things. And it was just like, you're living by yourself up here in a town where you really don't know anybody, and you're a grumpy old man, and people don't want to be your friend. Um, and in contrast with that, my own father lives in a community. He's 88, and he's going to be 88 next month. We're going for his birthday. But he has long-term health or care insurance, and he has an art studio, and we have conversations. He's like, yeah, it's all set up. The blueprints are up here. Your sister knows where they are. If I need, a lot of help, just get that converted. He's got the money to do it. Turn it into a room. It has a bathroom, like all the plumbing is in there to turn it into an actual granny flat. Move somebody in there and they can take care of me in my home for as long as I can stay here. And then, there's long-term facilities. He lives in an area where there's good quality care, and he can be old, and he still drives and stuff. I mean, he's really, I
That's my
expect him to
dad.
live to be 90. Or longer. I mean, he's just like, he's got all his marbles, he's active. The community is like, yeah, he has his own house, but in this compound, everybody's always like dropping by, and they're off doing stuff and
Oh,
playing
and
bocce ball. And
that's the other thing that I think people lose sight of. They feel that the best place is at home and like your father-in-law didn't want to go anywhere else, right? That they wanted to be, but that socialization part, it's like, my dad is 88.
uh-huh.
He's still driving. He's in the independent living. His social life is much more than mine. There's something at the community every day. The weekends are a little slow. But he's active. He's got people to talk to. People will know if he's not there. My brother and I happen to both be out of the country we overlapped trips for a few days. And I'm like, you've let people know that we're not around, right? He's like, yep. But I also know that even if he didn't tell them, if they didn't see him walking, he's the man walking all the time.
Yeah.
Somebody would go and check on him, right? you just know that. So my brother and I, we prefer one of us to be around,
Mhm.
but it just happened that when we scheduled our trips, we didn't think of the overlap, and it worked out fine. And, he doesn't want us to have to, feel like we need to be here. We don't right now. But if my dad, when we first moved down here, we were both living in this condo because he was waiting for an apartment to open up where he's at. And it came time for him to leave, and, he was not sure he wanted to, and he was like, but I'll miss you. And I said, I know, and I will miss you, but it's not gonna get any easier. Well, it's gonna actually get harder for you to go. I said, but just let's go look at it. And if you really don't like it and you're really not ready, I'm not gonna make you. And he went and he made the decision, and he will say now that he knows he's much happier there than he would have been in this condo and in this complex. So
It's
it,
just having the ability to interact with other people and do stuff. It's
yeah. And he
people
just
are,
felt if he went into one, he's like, I don't want to go and down and eat dinner with everybody. I'm like, you don't have to. There's a complete kitchen if you want to cook. Not sure, I'd be signing up for the meal plan myself, probably, right? I said, you can go down if you want and spend I think it's up to $12 for the dinner, right? It's not crazy. But he'd rather cook his own meals. So I said, you can. I said, it's not as like if you are in assisted living, right? There are some parameters there. You're not going to have a full kitchen. You might have a microwave or something like that. And so then once he understood that, but again, he only knew from the experience with his parents, right, of a home and how that worked. And that's the thing that I always tell people not to say that the generation such as, your dad, nursing home as you're just putting me out to pasture is how that is interpreted by that generation. And
oh yeah,
it's not that way. Some of these places are gorgeous.
we that's where we moved my father-in-law to when we moved into a smaller home, and my sons bought our old home that he was living with us in. And we found this great place for him to stay. And it was an independent living facility, and they had great food and lots of stuff to do. And his apartment was really nice, and they had a balcony and a kitchen, and we were bringing him food on top of that. And my husband was doing stuff with him. But he just was like, nope, I'm not doing this. And he went and bought another house. He bought a house an hour away. I was like, well, okay, Dad. The bank's getting the house back because, they were stupid enough to lend him the money. They could deal with the freaking house. But, I think he'd still be alive if he had just stayed there. And,
Yeah.
at some point, we all need to learn how to accept help from other people. And we were talking earlier about, you know, accepting help and finding help to care for your loved ones that you're having to care for. But um we are aging too, and we need to recognize that, hey, our kids are going to need to hire people to help us too. And be good about it. Don't
Yeah. It's crazy. I have a client, and his wife is in the early stages of the Alzheimer's, and he and I are talking, and I'm like, you need to take care of you, right, and do things for yourself. And he shared with me that he's told I guess like three neighbors has gone pretty much explained what's going on so that they're aware, and they've offered the help. And, it's so many people are like, oh, that's so nice, but then they don't accept it. And so he really wants to go and work the polls for the election. It's something that he's done for years and would like to do it. I said that I would ask them to see if they can, rotate. It's a full long day. It's like, I think like a 16-hour day for him to do that. I'm like, see if they'll do rotation. I said, they may say no, but I said, accept whatever it is. I said, and by the way, the sooner that you accept some help, the easier it will be to accept it each time.
Mhm.
And it will be easier for them, to be willing to say, hey, I could sit with, Sherry for X amount of time if that would, help you. Because they'll feel like you will receive it. Because once people offer it and no, I got it. No, I got it. They're going to stop.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that they don't want to help, but you've refused it and they don't know what they can do. Right. You have to tell them how they can help. If it would help, I know that the neighbors around my dad, he'd get these calls. Hey, I just made some chili and there's way too much. Would you like some? He's like, I never say no to food. And so, right. And I don't think that they made too much. They may have made too much or they intentionally made too much so that my dad didn't have to cook.
Yeah.
Right. And so he would accept those things. So he didn't really accept people coming in and sitting with my mom and that kind of thing. But it's why I told my client, I said, the sooner you accept, it's going to get easier for you to accept and you'll get more comfortable with them, with your wife, and your wife it will seem normal that they're coming over.
Yeah.
Right. And not, because that's the thing. People stop visiting my parents at their house. Because they didn't know if it was a good time or what, somebody says, hey, I'd like to buy. Well, usually these times are good, right? So tell them when would be a good time, sundowning, not a great time to come,
Yeah.
But earlier in the day, midday. And those are the things that I kind of help people go through and think about, and just where are they on the continuum? What things to put in place. And so when the time comes to make some of those difficult decisions, you can make a more informed decision.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's
What
not
they
like
want.
you're not having to make them on the fly. You can give them some thought. And if they're really emotional decisions for you, and sometimes they are very emotional decisions that you're making, um, you can look at them a little at a time. It's like if you're experiencing bouts of dementia or Alzheimer's with somebody that you love, and or that you have somebody that you love that has cancer and it's progressing but it's not real aggressive yet and they're still able to do stuff for themselves, that's the time to reach out to Beth. When you can start preparing for the moment that the transition is going to happen, where you're going to have to do more and more. Or, you know, if you've got older parents, having a conversation with her about, what can you expect? Because we're all going to die.
We are.
There's just,
You're right. Do and then there's the whole, documentation side, the advance directive, the will, who's the power of attorney for the finances, who's the power of attorney for the medical decisions, right? There's all these things. Do they have a place to be laid to rest? Do they want to be buried? Do they want to be cremated? Right? It's yeah, nobody wants to talk about that, but we're all going to pass, right? That's inevitable. And especially if you know of somebody who does have dementia, Alzheimer's, or something like that, having the conversation sooner when they really can be aware. They're not going to remember down the road,
No.
right? They're not going to remember that that they said, yes, I want to go into a memory care facility. I don't want to be at home. Say that that's what it is, right? And so you do that. They're going to be angry. They're not going to remember, but you're going to know that when they were able to have that rational thinking, that's
Mhm.
what they wanted, right? And so it takes some of the pressure off. It is kind of more, and you don't just jump in, and there's, how you do it is, again, I mentioned earlier, it's for their well-being, it's for their safety and security, right? For those with the memory, if they need to go into a memory care, that memory care unit is locked down because a lot of dementia patients are wanderers.
Yeah.
You
Little
know,
kids that are sleepwalking.
right. And it just is, even uh the house that my parents were in, there was a door to the basement.
Mhm.
And my mother was occasionally going into different rooms, like thinking she was going to the bathroom. She'd go, and I'm like, Dad, I think you need to put a lock on that. She's like, well, she never goes to the basement. I said, that's not why I'm saying it. I said, if she thinks that's the bathroom, and
She's
she
gonna fall down
opens
those stairs.
right, she opens the door and takes a step, she's going straight down. He was like, oh, he quickly, but those are the things that you're not thinking about, right? You get so many other things, the doctor's appointments, um, getting her dressed, getting her fed, what's she gonna eat today, what's she not gonna eat today? Um, and making all the follow-up phone calls and doing all these, there's so much that those things, my mother was not a flight risk. He did lock the door before he would leave, but she was very much a homebody, so it was not something that we were really concerned about. But we did also take some of those precautions, and we were lucky. She made the determination when she didn't want her car anymore.
That's that's a big deal.
Yeah, and one of my nephews has it now, so we fondly call it Judy. But yeah, I mean, if somebody's just starting out and they're wondering, right? And that's a good time to get in touch with me. If things are progressing and you feel like you're gonna need to make some decisions, that is a good time. And all part of it, it's not just the tactical and the logistics. There's also all these emotions, and it's a place to come and have those emotions validated. I will go in and I will ask questions as to why, what was it that came up about it that caused that, so that when the time comes, you can better navigate through it. And just with my mom, I tell people who have loved ones with dementia, I would watch what would trigger her. So I learned when she was in that place of knowing that she had the Alzheimer's but was in and out.
Mhm.
If I said, well, don't you remember?
Yeah.
Just the word remember. So only when I tell this do I use the word remember. I replaced it with recall because it's not so it wouldn't trigger her. But there are some of those little tricks, and just meet them where they are. You're
Yeah.
going to make your life a heck of a lot calmer if you're not arguing with them and that they ate that 2 hours ago, and they say, no, I didn't. I didn't have this. You just getting into arguments, but those are just some of the things. So there's the emotions. So there's the tactical, there's the logistics. You kind of have a plan. So you have an idea as to where you're going. Everybody's situation is different. Again, if it's not dementia, it could be the cancer or, the stroke or what, ever the situation. So it is a passion of mine. I started out, in the intro, you said life transitions, and that really is the overall arching of my business. But this piece of it is a passion.
And it's, like I said before, it's such an important endeavor to be undertaking. I mean, people really do need your kind of coaching out there. You're a life coach, you're a certified life coach, so you have all the tools that you need to help somebody navigate a lot of the emotional components of all of the different things that are going on. And it's a lot when you start taking on another human being's life, because you're basically having to do all the life skills for yourself and this other human being who's not able to do them anymore, but they still have all of these things that need addressing every day
Right.
that they can't deal with.
Right. You're taking on the needs that they have and fulfilling that. And it comes on top of an already full, if not overflowing plate. Whether you're working, you've got kids, you've got a partner or spouse, hobbies, friends, right? So not only do you have the transition of caring for your loved one, you have the transitions of all those other things.
Yeah.
Can you, if you were working full time, can you still, or do you need to change that? Do you need to move to be closer to your loved one? Or do you need to move them to you? Right? And then how it impacts the other family members. It truly is kind of a domino. And that's where, as much as I've got the caregiving continuum to help with that plan, which I think is really important for people to feel like they have a sense of control. They don't, but they have a sense of control, right? No offense, people, but you don't, because you don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. But logically, this is the way that the caregiving would go. And so what are your options and what are the possible routes to go that way? And then I support, there's, life coaches call it growth work, but this really isn't growth work. This is really kind of homework, right? Some action items that you're going to do. And so, I kind of keep you accountable for those so that they don't get away from you, because it's so easy. Life happens.
Yeah.
But we come up with, 3 to 5 action items that feel reasonable between the week to 2 weeks in between sessions. And really, it's all truly directed by the client, and it's what they need at that time.
That's awesome. And they can get a hold of you through your website. Why don't you go ahead and give that, and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes.
Yeah, it is withinyoucoaching.com, and it's WITHIN, the letter U, coaching.com. There is a way to get to the caregiving continuum that I spoke about that on the website, as well as booking a free complimentary call, that we can discuss what your situation is and, if we're a good fit for each other and how perhaps I can support them on their journey.
That's awesome. And what's the one thing that you hope the audience takes away from this conversation today?
First and foremost is that they are not alone, and to live their life by design, not by default. it's so easy for us to just, well, this is what it is. And, just take it day by day when we can craft our life more than that. And especially in a caregiving, you can be part of the architect for where it's going to go.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It offers hope in a situation that people find themselves in, and it's so easy to feel like there is no hope. I'm just like trapped. And really you don't have to be.
You don't have to be. And again, I spoke with a friend of mine recently, and she's like, well, it's confirmed I'm not a caregiver. She was she was off helping her dad, and she's like, oh yeah, no, I thought I could do this. She's like, this is really hard. But what she learned was that she called upon other family members. So she would, I think, what did she do? 7 days on, 2 days off, 7 days on. So that worked for her. She got some time and rejuvenated to go back and do that. And since then, they've found a facility that is really good for him and close to family. But that's one of the eye-opening things that you're like, this isn't, and people can sense that, right? And so it's not a good experience for anybody, and it's not a good fit. So
Yeah,
but there is hope. As I said, you're not alone. It's just knowing where to find some people to help you along the way. And I'd
That's
love
awesome.
to be one of those people.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Beth.
Thank you, Jill. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another empowering episode of the You World Order Showcase podcast. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our incredible life, health, and transformational coaches who are making a profound impact on the world. Remember, change begins with you, and you have the power to transform your life and the lives of others. If you want to take that next step and unlock your true potential, visit thecoachesalchemist.com, where you can find the 3 ways we can help you for free to spin your talent into gold with clarity, a system, and a plan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more people with our positive message. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and upcoming guest announcements. You can find us on Facebook at the You World Order, or simply visit thecoachesalchemist.com.